Welcome to the second video for Chapter 1, Introduction to Hospitality Marketing. In today's video, we'll be focusing on the definition of what is services marketing, and we'll also be looking at the differences between goods and services, as well as a few of the trends in the hospitality industry. One of the reasons that we focus on service marketing is that service marketing has taken a preeminent position within the economy of the United States. From the 1940s to the mid-1980s, the emphasis was really on the marketing of products for goods and services, goods rather than services. In the United States, those services currently account for more than 75% of our domestic production. Thus, we tend to have more of a service-based economy than a production goods-based economy. And as noted in your text, most new job creation is also in the services sector. Because of this, it's critically important that we understand the differences between services and goods and how that can affect the marketing process. Let's begin by defining what we mean by a service. A service is defined in your text as something that is not a physical good, something that you can possess, but rather it is the performance of an act or a deed. And I think we all intuitively know what a service entails. But there are a few characteristics that I wanted to talk about that differentiate service that make it different from a marketing concept. One of those is that services tend to be very intangible. Because you can't physically hold something, you can't keep it, you can't store it, it is an intangible element, and because of that, it's primarily based on the experience that the customer is receiving. So service industries, including the hospitality and tourism areas, are really selling consumers an experience rather than a product or something that they can store or use later and so forth. So the delivery of that product and the expectations of the customers and whether or not those expectations are met are critically important in the tourism industry. It is responsibility of everybody who is delivering that product, along the way the service employees, that that customer have a positive experience, and therefore they carry forward that positive experience, the intangible element, and can report through reviews and through repeated service that they enjoyed what they received. The text lists a variety of different reasons why the services provided differ from goods. And some of the key ones include the fact that when you're done with a service, the customer doesn't own anything that they can refer back to. Again, that's because, as we mentioned earlier, it's an intangible product. A second element of that is that as part of the service process, the customers are much more involved in the creation of the experience than they would be in the creation of a good. For example, the creation of a coffee mug, the customer would have absolutely nothing to do with that. However, the experience of being in a coffee shop with your friends and enjoying a conversation, the customer is very involved with that as an integral part of the process. So the people are actually part of the experience that they're having. There's a couple of other things that differ. One is that there's greater variability in terms of what's being provided. Goods are fairly standardized. There isn't a great deal of variability from one to another. However, with services, the quality of the service provided and the people who are providing the service can create a great deal of variety. Secondly, they're a lot harder to evaluate because we don't have something tangible to do our evaluation upon. We can't look at physical characteristics, we can't look at use, we can't look at lifespan of something. Instead, we're trying to evaluate people's perceptions of their experiences. And then a few final points. With a services-based business, you don't have any inventory to stock. Therefore, it changes a lot on the business pattern when you don't have to deal with an inventory, but you do have to provide the services. So oftentimes personnel is exchanged for inventory. There's also some importance of time and time considerations. And then finally, different distribution channel services is often provided on a more personal level because the customers are part of the process. The chart on the slide summarizes some of the key aspects of what it means for something to be a service as opposed to a good. For example, as we've noted previously, services are intangible. They're not something that can be returned because they're an experience. They can't be stored, as opposed to a good, which can be stored and consumed. There's really no ownership to a service because, as again, it's an experience. And then finally, it's easy to compare one good to another good because of the features of that good. However, it's much more difficult to compare in an objective manner the customer service, because that is based on the expectations of the customers and the great variety in the experiences that they have. I'll be wrapping up this video by discussing 3 of the larger trends that are affecting the tourism and hospitality industries, particularly in the United States. One of those trends is shrinking customer loyalty. Consumers are getting much better at shopping around for the best deal that they can get, and they really are only loyal to those organizations that consistently give them a good deal or a good value. And that leads us into the next one, but let's hold for a second and talk a little bit about how this is done. One of the easiest ways to do that is to develop loyalty programs and then to tie those loyalty programs together so that individuals get a better perceived value for what they're getting. So for examples of loyalty programs in the travel and tourism industry include the frequent flyer programs, frequent traveler programs, special programs designed by hotel chains to encourage repeated stay over a shorter period of time. And if you take all of these programs with rental car companies and so forth and tie them all together, then an individual uses that particular program and the services provided by those different companies in order to get the best value for the dollar that they're spending. Part of this is based on the second trend, which is the increasing consumer sophistication. In the old days, the focus was really, individuals tended to focus more on the quality of what they were receiving or the price of what they were receiving. But because consumers are more sophisticated now in terms of the searches that they can do and the information that they have about the tourism industry, what we're starting to see now is more of a focus on value. So a basic way of balancing the two characteristics of quality and price. So you're willing to give up some on quality for an increase for a lower price, or you're willing to pay a greater amount for a better quality. And that's the definition of value. Value for what you are paying for that particular service. So the key here for the tourism marketer is to create a perception of value, create a good positive perception of value. And one of the ways we do that is by increasing what's offered. So increase the quality while maintaining the price or holding the price where it is. And one of the ways that you can do that is by bundling. Bundling allows you to provide multiple services, usually at a reduced price, and it also simplifies things for the consumer because they're getting all the services that they need in one package. This can be done in the hotel industry. We often see it in the fast food industry, in the restaurant sector. We see people doing these bundles to make it easier, but also to increase the perception, the value of what they're receiving. The third major trend has to do with the increased emphasis on the needs of individual consumers as opposed to dealing with all consumers as a large mass market. The new sophistication and technology that's available through our database management allows us to really focus and target what we do with our marketing to the individual. Now when somebody checks into a hotel, their favorites, their preferences, and so forth are all stored in a database. So someone checking them in knows, for example, what kind of room they would like. Would they like a room that's away from traffic, per se, or are they willing to pay more for a better view? They know these things because they're all these preferences are stored in databases. And with that, it allows us to customize the experience of the customer, therefore making it a more positive experience, more positive appraisal by the customer, and they're more likely to return and more likely to give the services a positive review.